have so and also the kind of format that I do things is I like draw little pictures for fun. Like while I talk, I like to draw pictures, and I also write stuff on Notepad. I'm very simple, but that's kind of how I do my videos. Whenever I like teach things to people online, I just like this is like it's like my whiteboard, like everything I need to teach. um, so I'll probably be using this stuff. So, okay. So basically, you are looking to build your first game, and you have no experience whatsoever. And if that sounds like you, this content is for you. Okay. So, when you're building your first game, you naturally have a lot of questions. Like, how do I make things appear on the screen? That's the very first question of like game development. And then how do I make stuff move? How do I make stuff collide? Wait a minute. Like, there's all these game engines that people are talking about. Like, should I use a game engine? What game engine should I use? Should I go 2D or 3D? Where should I get art assets? Should I draw my own? Where should I, where do I get music? Where do I get all this stuff, sound effects? Um, all that jazz. And so there's like a million things going around in your head. And like the one piece of advice I have for all those things you're thinking about for making a game is it's it's kind of like a silly, it doesn't really answer the question. But I have one piece of advice to answer all those things. It's not it doesn't answer the questions individually, it's just an answer. And my answer is drop it. Drop all of it. So yeah, that's the first thing I'll do. Drop it. So, yeah, whatever, remake of Call of Duty you wanted to make, um, it's, or like you want to remake Fortnite or, whatever your favorite video game, but you want to like, I don't know, add crazy, like explosions to it. I don't know, whatever. So I will say that those games are made by like professional game developers. In fact, I kind of have like I have like a few tips that I want to give people for their first game they ever build, whether it is a game jam or not a game jam. But my tip number one is that like so you are a noob. That's tip number one. What does that mean? So first off, like no matter what you do, like whether you choose a game engine or like I guess you'll presumably use some sort of game engine. Um, but whatever you choose to use, no matter what you do, you have to understand like this is your first game. So like one way that I like to tell people this is that games, like game development and just games in general, is actually art. Um, so when you're a game developer, you're actually an artist. So suppose instead of being a game developer, you were another type of artist. So let's say you decided to be a sculptor instead of being a game developer. So is your first sculpture going to be some beautiful like sculpture that's going to become famous or like, go in like London or something, like those big like lion statue things like made of gold? I don't know what they are. But you know what I mean. Like some famous statue. Like is that really going to be your first sculpture you're ever going to build? And the answer is no. In fact, the first sculpture you're going to build is probably going to be like a cup. Like maybe on one of those spinny things where you like make a little cup or something, or I don't know. But you see where I'm going with that? Like basically, when so when you make games, you can kind of make an analogy to other art forms. Like your first game, you should focus on your first things. So to make kind of an analogy, um, like if let's say like to make an analogy from the sculpting to like gaming. Let's say the sculpt like those beautiful famous sculptures is like Call of Duty. And like that little sculpture of the cup you might build, that's kind of like tic-tac-toe. You see what I mean? Like the level of tic-tac-toe all the way up to building some AAA game called like Call of Duty. So there's my point. So you're not going to make Call of Duty on your first game, and especially not in 10 days. Um, so let's see. Yeah. And oh, okay. So this leads me to my next tip. Oh, so you're not going to build something amazing. Just and like your focus should be how do I make my first game? How do I get my feet wet? And just getting started, right? Like and with the basics. Um, so yeah, so my tip number 2 is go for something extremely simple. Um, so I've gone to like a hackathon, not a game jam, but I've gone to a lot of hackathons, and I went to one where a team literally made an app that was just like a single button, like it was the screen. Oh, oh, I think I got a follow. Did I get a follow? Hey, I got a follow. Shout out. Thank you, Mel Wing, for following. Um, that's weird. I don't know how many viewers I have. I think I have one viewer. Usually my stream manager is a viewer, but anyway, thank you. Yeah, so where was I? So they built an app that was like literally like on the screen. Their app had a single button. Like, but at their skill level, you know, they were learning how to style buttons and how to like add interactivity to buttons. And so that app was a great app for them, like for in particular. And honestly, the button itself, like, what looked really, really good. Like imagine for a whole hackathon, the whole weekend, all you work on is one button. Like imagine how awesome you can make one button. Like it had like amazing graphic design, like beautiful. Like it had shading, it had really good shadows. It kind of had this like 3D effect. Like it just looked really good. You could hover over it, had, like animations, uh, like like hover animations, and just like honestly clicking the button on their screen was really satisfying, which is crazy. Like I was actually super impressed. So that kind of like what's the point is that like something simple can still be impressive. So like look at like Flappy Bird, right? Like that game blew up. It was I don't, if you don't know about Flappy Bird, it's just this really simple game that blew up. Uh, and it was super duper simple. Or like even like Pac-Man, like some of the classics, right? They're not that complex. Well, maybe the AI in Pac-Man's a little complex, but like the game itself, the look of it, all that stuff is not that complex, but these are like huge games. So simple doesn't mean not cool. Yeah. So you can still build something cool even if it's simple. But for the sake of learning, you want to focus on simple. Um, Tip number 3. So no matter what you use, like whichever game engine out there, you will have to learn. So like no matter what you do, you're gonna have to learn something. So there will be, and when you have to learn things, there's a learning curve. So that learning curve will take time. Now, if you're using a game engine like Unity or Unreal or Game Maker, you will have to learn like the workspace, like the whole layout of that game engine. You'll have to learn the ecosystem and also kind of the common workflows for how to do certain things within that given engine. And just familiarizing yourself with a new engine can take like possibly a week or so, maybe like yeah, let's say a week. So I've actually taught Unity, beginner Unity development, at a community college, and I will tell you that the first couple of weeks of class was just familiarizing ourselves with the Unity workspace, and you know all the things like prefabs and all the things like that. So if you're gonna do a game jam, if you like on day one, if you start with an engine, um, oh hey, what's up? Oh, gee. I just got a message. It's true. I do have more eyes than usual. From Cypher Wolf. Um, yeah, I don't usually have viewer like too many viewers, so I'm like, I do stream just a little side aside. I do play Rocket League, um, just for fun, and that's kind of how I started streaming. Um, I'm a teacher by like by my profession, but I don't usually stream it. But this time I wanted to kind of give back and stream. So thank you, Cyberwolf. Oh, oh, sorry, concept and coding. White space. I'll get to that in a sec. Let me go ahead and say question answer. So answer. How do I put things on the screen? So we use HTML tags. They're also called uh, like another word for a tag is also called an element, an HTML element. So let's see, an HTML elements. Nice. Let's see. Okay, so the next thing is white space. So that's kind of what I just ran into on accident. But you can see, so here's another thing. So this thing, the elements shows you the elements that are on the page. But there's another thing, if you right click and say view page source, this shows you the actual source code of the web page. It's slightly different. Because this you can't dynamically edit. This is the raw source code that was actually sent to the browser in the first place. Um, so yeah, so this, yeah, you can't edit it, but you can save it. Like I can do Control S. I can just save this website source. Yeah, it's just plain text. So yeah, so space you can so getting back to it. So white space. So white space. I think to me, white space is anything that is not a character. So white space is actual spaces, like new lines, new lines, tabs. You see what I mean? It's like white space is anything that is space. So, yeah, that's gonna be like right here, right? Think of like any. I don't know if I can think of anything else like spaces, tabs, like a new like carriage. It's called a carriage return as well. I don't know how to spell carriage return. It's also called line break. Has a lot of names. Line break, carriage return, whatever, all the same thing. So yeah, that's white space. And white space, all these things in code. So here's one thing that's nice to know. In most code, okay, I'm lying a little bit. Some coding languages they actually do care about white space. But for the sake of learning, we're gonna say that for most when you're coding in most coding languages, white space, spaces, tabs, new lines, those three things, they are all the same thing. The computer does not care about white space. So white space is ignored. So I'll put a little this. That means like note above. It's all ignored. So what does that mean is that in technically this whole thing, like let's just, for the sake of gaming, let's call this thing, let's pretend this is a really boring game that all it does is shows a blank screen and that's it. You don't really win or lose. But for the sake of this game, um, they could have put this whole thing on one line. Like they just chose to like people choose to put things on new lines because it's easier for us humans to read the code. Like you could code an entire game, like any software could be written on one line of code that spans like to infinity. But it would be awful. Like nobody is gonna want to work with you, and you're not gonna want to work with yourself for very long, because it's gonna be really hard. Oh, if you're wondering why I'm reaching to the side, I'm getting my tea. Gotta get some tea for the boys and the girls. Let's see. Okay. Gotta get this tea packet out. Feel like it's been in there for a while. Quick tea break. All right. Where to put it? I didn't really think this one through. I don't have any place to put my tea bag. I'll just put it right here. I just put it straight on my desk. Okay. Let's see, where was I? Oh, right, white space. So yeah, so white space. White space is ignored in code. It's anything that is not characters. Bingo bongo. Let's go. Okay. Oh, Python. You gave it away. Yeah, it's Python's the one that cares about white space. Um, didn't want to say anything. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, it's Python. That language particularly actually does care about white space. But before you do Python, it doesn't matter. Okay, cool. So let's see. Where to next? Okay, so I think now I'm gonna jump over The next thing to do is we are going to use code to manipulate the DOM. So just as a quick recap, what is the DOM? The DOM is the document. It's the document. It is basically the document, and I'll just put this object model. Fancy stuff. What it actually is. It's the document. You know, why we got to put that stuff there to make it sound fancy, right? Make it sound more serious. Just like CSS, cascading style sheets. It's like, or they could just say style. So we are going to use JavaScript code. So JavaScript is the language that our game engine uses. And for the purposes, let me just yeah, JavaScript. I'll just wiki. I don't know. I like to look things up, see kind of what there is about it. Yeah, look at that. JavaScript is a programming language that is one of the core technologies of the World Wide Web, along with HTML and CSS. Over 97% of websites use JavaScript. That's a lot of websites. Okay. So yeah, so basically JavaScript is our scripting language for our engine, and our engine is the browser. So we're going to be writing our game in JavaScript. Dun, da, da, da. Okay, so all right, groovy. So we're not going to write a script quite yet. What we're going to do to stay beginner friendly, where we currently are, is we are going to use the console. So what the console is, it's like you can kind of think of here's the analogy. Like the console is kind of like a calculator. Like when you're using like a calculator, right, you can add 2 plus 5, and then it'll enter and it'll give you 7. So the console is kind of like a calculator, but for the web. So what we're gonna do here is so here we can, it's think of it as your calculator for the web that lets you run little pieces of JavaScript. That's what it is. So yeah, so we have our element inspector and our console. And I will say, 95% of the time, we are going to be using the console and elements. So these two things, the other stuff doesn't really matter that much. I mean, it does, but these are the two mains. And naturally, right? They put them farthest to the left. So yeah. So basically, let's do some console stuff. Let's see. Okay, maybe I should jump back a little bit. Okay, so the next thing is, I'll make this smaller now, because before I just had a huge smiley face. So what's our next question we're going to try to answer? So, okay, so how do I put things on the screen with JavaScript? But to get there, we need to know a little bit about JavaScript. So, let's see. Did I spell that right? Yes, I did. Okay. So if I was gonna give you okay, rephrase. So right now, we're doing a game jam. So when we're jamming, we're not gonna learn all the intricacies of things. So we gotta get rather than the quick start, we need the super duper quick start. And I have a super duper quick start for JavaScript. So here it is. Okay, so JavaScript. So JavaScript is a coding language. It's a programming language. So a programming language is just like a language. It's kind of it's a language. So I'm gonna kind of start there. It's a language just like any other language, even English or French. So English, French, Spanish, Chinese, whatever, you get the point. So okay, so we know that it's a language. The next step is like, okay, and like languages have rules. So like, we've learned the language we speak. We learned it so long ago that we kind of forgot the rules and we just flow. And the same can kind of go for programmers. Like once you know the rules of a programming language, you just flow. You don't really like think anymore. Um, so I like what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna tell you those like a very broad overview of those rules. So the first thing, like there's not too many rules, I don't think. The first rule of the JavaScript language is that semicolons. So okay, this is debatable, but for the sake of learning, we're going to use semicolons. So a semicolon is kind of synonymous to a period. Like it's a end of statement. So it's kind of like when we speak, you say something and then you put a period at the end, or when you type English, you say something then you put a period. So same thing with coding. When you're coding, you generally, whenever you have a statement, you do something and then you put a semicolon, and that tells the computer, like it's kind of like a period. Like that's what I want to do. Done. It's like okay. Um, so that's kind of the first thing. If you see semicolons, that all that means is you can kind of think of it as your period. It's the end of your statement. Um, the next thing is, let's see, where should I go next? Okay, so parentheses. So parentheses, like if you like remember from math class, like do you guys remember like let's see, like this syntax, like let's see, delete you. Oops. You know what? Let me do a paint bucket. There we go. I'll just do a new layer. So this, if you remember this, f of x, and you were like, I have no idea what it is, but I'm just going to roll with it, So this f is actually a function. And coding is actually, it's a language that is like kind of the language of mathematics. Like it's the mathematical language that we use to have computers do things. Um, so basically code was kind of invented by mathematicians. At one point in time, they were kind of almost the same thing. Or in fact, coding was a branch of like the math department, and then it became its own department, like a lot of things. Um, so like that. So, but what like I guess what I'm trying to say in your math class, f is the name of a function. F, that is the name, and like it's really boring because in math class it was always f, like f of x. But in coding, so that's your function name. And then you have two parentheses. Those parentheses take in your things called inputs. Yeah, there we go. So when we're code like, mathematicians were like, well, let's just use the same exact syntax and syntax means language rules. If I say syntax a lot, that just means language rules. So all languages have syntax. Those are just the rules of the language. Okay. Getting somewhere. So let's see. So yeah, so the syntax of JavaScript and also in C, C++, Java, Python, yeah, everywhere. Everywhere uses parentheses to take in inputs to functions. Or sorry, yeah. So yeah, so like in coding, your function might not be f, it might be let's just say we make a function called we want something to shoot a projectile. So our function would say fire, like to fire a some kind of projectile. So we'd say fire. And then maybe the inputs, rather than just being x, we now need an x. So an x coordinate, we need a y coordinate, and we might need a direction. So there you go. So there's a new name of your function. Same thing, fire. parentheses, inputs. And in math, or sorry, in programming, they don't call these inputs. They have a new name for them. A lot of new names. These are now called arguments. So if you hear the word argument, um, that's what they are. So inputs, okay, like this will help. This will, of course, they are slightly different. These are also called parameters sometimes. Parameters. Let's go ahead and save this. Good stuff. Params. Okay. What? Can I just do a paint on that? Yeah. I like to save my notes. Why not? Okay. So, okay, there we go. Cool. So we got so these are the same. Name, inputs, name, parameters, arguments, slash argument. Same thing. And we got the parentheses. So what can we say about parentheses are these are for holding parameters for functions. Cool. And then we have the last syntax element you need to know are, so there's semicolons, parentheses, and then we have squiggly braces is what we call them. I actually don't know the official term of these things. To me, they're just squiggly braces. If anyone knows the actual name of those squiggly braces, let me know. Or you know what? I'll just look them up. What is the official term for squiggly bracket? Oh, they're just called braces. Curly braces. Squiggly brackets. Okay. Oh, wow. Okay, they're called braces, so I wasn't too far off. So braces... No, I still like squiggly braces, let's be real. I can't just say braces, it just doesn't sound right, you know? So braces are containers for code, and we're going to see those more in a bit. But these contains code. So and these so you can actually put code in different containers, and that's very important. Because when you put code in containers, it allows you to reuse your code for other purposes, and that is like the core of all programming. Is you build one thing, and then you use that thing to build other things, and then once you build those other things, you can use those other things to build more things, and then and so on and so forth. Yeah. Thank you. I just thanks for the shout out or the comment. Vaxerol said this is cool. I too think coding is pretty cool. Yeah, I started when I was pretty young and I had no idea what I was doing. Yeah, and but when you're young, you have a lot of time to kill, so you can do things wrong. Let's see, are also called accolades. But I doubt, yeah. That just sounds super duper intense. I feel like I'm like Tenacious D level, like epic, like the accolades, the rock I don't know. I don't know why that sounds super epic. But it just does to me. Um, so yeah, so blocks contain code for it contains code, and I'm just gonna put it in parentheses for reuse. Kind of. Well, like most times. We'll see. I'll show you. There's a special thing called an if. There's these. Okay, they're reserved statements that don't quite follow these rules, but they are for they're reserved for the purposes, and they kind of follow these rules, as you'll see. Like there's a thing called an if statement. There's another thing called a while statement, and there's another thing called a for statement, and those are kind of like the fundamental building blocks of code. Like more, those are like you can think of those as like the building blocks on top of the syntax. So yeah, so there you go. And this is exactly what I was trying to say. Like if I go all the way back to the beginning when I was saying like no matter what you do, you're gonna have to learn. And for our game engine, the browser, no matter what you do, you're gonna have to learn JavaScript. Um, so these here are the fundamental building blocks of JavaScript right here. There you go. And I'm actually gonna scroll down just so I can put it in the center. Um, so just recap. That's semicolons like end of statement, like a period. These are for holding parameters, also called arguments. And these are called, and these squiggly braces are for holding code, for containing code. And containing code, so these little blocks, they have a thing, like you can, they are also, let's see, so contains code. Another word for these are called blocks. Another word for this is also called a scope. Because blocks have their own scope, where their own little, it's like a little sandbox where if you create stuff in that block, it only exists in that block. And that is called a scope. So, yeah. So there you go. We're not quite going to do if statements yet, but with these rules alone, like an if statement will feel supernatural, and I will show, like you will see that. So let's see. Okay, right. So let's go back to our browser. sorry for the long aside. I hope that was useful. Um, so the next thing we're going to do is we are going, okay, so let's see, we did an aside. So our aside was, okay, how do we put things on the screen with JavaScript? Well, first we got to learn a little bit of JavaScript. So we got like the basic building blocks of JavaScript. Like, so now if you see some code, you're going to feel a little bit more comfortable. Like, okay, those squiggly braces mean that's some code being contained. Okay, there's a function there. Okay, there's a whole bunch of statements, yada, 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 yada. Okay, so let's see. Okay, you know what? I took and I'm now thinking like, okay, there's one more thing. So now we're getting in. So this is like kindergarten. Okay, that's like the kindergarten rules. Now we're gonna like jump over to like the next grade, you know, which is like, okay, now we have, so these are all just like syntactical, what would I call them? Like elements, and then we have like these things called keywords. So keywords are kind of part um, of the language as well. So the keywords are reserved words that you cannot use because they are dedicated to specific functions to tell the computer to do things. So one of those keywords is let. So let tells the computer that, hey, computer, I want to create a variable. So and a variable is a thing that holds things. You can kind of think of it as a container for data, sort of, or like it's better just to write it. So let's go ahead and go back to our console, and let's go ahead and just like let's write our first line of JavaScript. So let's say let a equal 1, end statement. So what this does to the computer, this tells the computer, hey, let's go like kind of character by character. So let says, hey computer, I want to create a variable. So it's kind of like let a equal 1. It kind of flows off your tongue well, right? So like let it be something that exists. I don't know why they use the word let. It used to be var for variable, which to me makes a little bit more sense, but it's now in the new version of JavaScript, in the latest versions of JavaScript, var is kind of like looked down upon, and now you should use let. So, you know, luckily they're both 3 letters, so it's not the end of the world. So yeah, so basically let says, okay, just create a variable. We're going to be using that a ton. So let a, so a is the name of our variable. And I could have said let's, like, if you, oh, really quickly too, let me go ahead and put a, and just press enter. And the computer, you can see here, oh, a, the value of a, like, so you can see here, this has that sign. I guess for you guys it's probably that way. So that has this sign that says let a, so that's my statement. And then there's the sign that goes that way that gives the result. So undefined. So the reason why this said undefined is because my statement didn't give a result. It was just a declaration. Whereas this statement, I was like, hey, give me a. Like, computer, give me a, and the computer spit out 1. So now that a is declared, oh wait, Yeah, okay, let. Yeah, so A is how it's like let like a let's let x equal 2. Yeah, so yeah, maybe let came from math. It's just like I feel like it was slang though, you know? It's like if we let b equal 5, they could have just said like I don't know, if b is 5, you know? You know what I mean? Like let. But yes, it comes from math, like the slang or the street talk of math. I guess. I don't know. That's another thing. Like I feel like coding is kind of like the street smarts of math. Like if you know like math, you don't necessarily know how to code. It's kind of like if you're book smart, you're not necessarily street smart. If you're like math smart, you're not necessarily code smart. Just my opinion. That doesn't, that's kind of sort of. Like you don't have to be book smart to be code smart, I guess is what I'm saying. Like you don't have to be math smart to be books or math smart to be code smart. They're kind of different. Just like how street smart and book smart are different. Um, so yeah, so let a equal 1. Another thing I want to do is I want to declare another variable. Let's call this variable be banana. Yeah, so you thought I was going to do b, right? I think everyone. So I will say in most coding things, you use like A, B, C, D, E, F, G. You just keep going. But for games, for the game jam, we're going to be using A and then banana. Why? I don't know. I just don't know. So let banana equal 2. So now we have two variables, A and banana. um, so if I go ahead, so on my calculator that I have, like again, we are kind of treating this console. This console is kind of like our calculator equivalent for JavaScript. So I'm gonna go ahead. I'm gonna go ahead and just say A plus banana. And look, there's like a code hint here that tells me like what to do, and we can see here there's a bunch of stuff. So it's giving me code hints. Like if I just type B, um, there's a lot of things that already exist that are built. So remember how I was saying like with code blocks you build stuff and then you want to reuse that stuff. Well, there's already a bunch of stuff that exists in the browser that someone else built for you, like a blob event or a broadcast channel or a background fetch manager or a bar prop. Do I know what any of these things are? No. But um yeah, battery manager. So but those are things that exist that other people built. So we're going to be doing that for our game very, soon. But for now we're just learning JavaScript. And like and what you should be like I think rephrase. What I'm saying, okay, like I think a lot of people get bored. They're like, "Oh, coding's easy." I've taught code for a lot of years, and like the first couple weeks of coding classes, we're just literally doing this all day. Like, okay, now we did A plus B, and it was 5, and then you're like, okay, now let's do like A minus B. And it's like it's -1, and you're like, okay, now let's do like A times B, and it's like, oh, okay, like, oh, by the way, the star is multiplication. Let's just do it. And that a slash is division. So like in a lot of programming classes, the first couple weeks, like I would even say like the first 3 weeks of like coding classes in college and anything, they just do math. And I think a lot of people like it's funny. People are like, "Oh, this coding stuff is easy." It's like I don't need to put any effort into this class at all. And then like for some reason, coding classes like it gets super easy in the beginning. Like you're literally doing this for weeks, and then all of a sudden you just like do ifs and loops and this and that, and then it just gets like hard all of a sudden. So it's like I swear, like every programming class that I've been a TA for, teaching assistant, like there's like a solid like third of the class it's like, okay, I'm too cool for this, it's too easy, this is gonna be a breeze, whatever. And like I can tell that they're like totally mentally checked out. And then like a few weeks later they come like running to my office hours and they're like I don't know what's going on, none of this makes sense. I'm like, well, yeah, because like, oh, and also like they think they're too cool and they stop showing up to class. So anyway. Didn't quite. I hear you, Alex. My first semester at my exam was to. Oh, right. Your exam was to do a calculator. Yeah, so yeah, I gotcha. I gotcha. Like to build a calculator in code. So yeah, that's actually not easy to build a calculator, because you have to do a thing called what is it called, like a tensor to like parse. Yeah, yeah, that's it's a little bit more complicated. Like what he's saying in his exam is kind of like you have to build the thing we're using. So yeah, it's not that scary. Let me just stop and say, um, I have a philosophy that nothing is hard if you know how to do it. So it's just a matter of knowing. So never be afraid to do anything because it's not scary if you know it, and the people that know it's not scary. Do you follow what I mean? Yeah. Okay, so the Wikipedia pseudocode on shunting yard to see. I don't know what shunting yard is. Is that an algorithm? Oh, it is an algorithm. Yeah. So it's like a yeah, parsing. Yeah, okay, reverse Polish. Yeah. Okay, this is getting I'm going into a rabbit hole. But okay, I learned a new algorithm. My favorite algorithm is the what is it? The knapsack algorithm. I think that's a it's just a funny name. But anyway, we don't have to go into that. We're focusing on beginner stuff here, you know. So yeah. So anyway, where were we? We have A and banana. So now I'm going to do another thing. I'm going to change the value of A. Let's say A equals 5. So notice I don't say let. So I don't have to redeclare A because A is like let means I'm creating. So this is actually this here. It's actually doing two things. I actually jumped the gun on you guys. I did two things in one line. Technically, this here, I'm gonna go ahead and refresh the page. So now we gotta like, oh yeah, if I refresh, it's all gone. Like if I try to do A plus banana, uncut reference, A is not defined. I just clicked refresh, everything is gone. Another thing that's kind of like turning off and on your calculator, right? Everything's gone. Um, so what I wrote there is technically two lines. Like technically, all you have to do is this: let A. Now, if I if I just try A right now, it's undefined. So A has a value. So this alone created A. So whereas if I do it without that, I say A. I just say A. Uncaught, reference error, A is not defined. So by doing let, oops, by saying let A, and statement, remember, semicolon, and, A is undefined. So, or sorry, and then I do A again. Now it exists. So A exists, the variable A exists, but it is undefined. It literally means it is not defined yet. And, uh, yeah, so we have a comment here. We're saying like the two useful things to explain programming are, yeah, programming isn't about code. It's about logic. That is true. That is very true. I agree. Code translates the comments for the computer. No, no, no. The next comment was sorry for the uncalled reference. It's not a problem. That's what game jams are for uncalled things. Um, and yeah, I like that. Code translates the comments for a computer. So yeah, I like that. Um, so actually on that comment, there's actually a couple things I want to say. The first thing is I absolutely agree. Programming is not about code. And I actually have kind of a follow up on that. It's about logic. And I have like there's another follow up. I actually like this is a secret in the programming world is that programmers actually don't even write code from scratch. Like very rarely. And like what we actually do is we find code that exists, we copy paste the crap out of it, and then kind of tweak it to make it do what we want. But that's the secret, that's the reality of coding in the real world. That in school they're like, don't do that, don't do that. And then you get into industry, and then it's just like, oh yeah, if there's code already written, like we're for sure gonna do it. It's funny that like schools like they call that cheating, and then once you're done with school, You just like you're like school cheating all day every day. You don't really code much. You just copy paste and tweak. Um, but yeah, code explains the comments to a computer. Yes, yes. So like we want to do some things. Like I guess the commentary is like, oh, like the comments are like literally what you're saying. Like, hey, computer, do this. But the computer doesn't know, so you have to like kind of code it. You have to like translate it into code so the computer understands it. Um, that's yeah, same thing. Like that's what it is. Like you're doing the translating, and like just a little side note, like kind of like Siri, like when you're like hey or hey Siri or whatever it is, or Alexa, like hey Alexa, like do this. Like that's kind of the same thing, right? Like you're commenting on what Alexa should do, and then Alexa has like an automatic translator that translates that into like actual computer logic. So when we're coding, it's like we just don't have Alexa. We have to write the logic ourselves. Uh, Yep, yep. And then like just got a comment from Alex. He's like every time I get an error, I go to Stack Overflow. We will get into that. We will be using Stack Overflow heavily. Um, so Stack Overflow is like the Wikipedia for all things code. That's what it's called. So if you hear like the abbreviation SO that stands for Stack Overflow, it is like the place for coders. Like you copy paste from Stack Overflow. You when you have a problem, you go to Stack Overflow. When you don't have a problem, when you have a super cool solution, you try to answer a problem with your super cool solution. It's just yeah, lots of code there. Um, right, where was I? So we got let. Yeah, so that's a keyword. That's a big one. So we'll be using. Right. So I'm going to now. So okay, right. So now a is defined. Now to define a, we just say a equals 5, and now a is 5. Like I can just keep doing that. And I think this thing gets a little bit too much for you. I think you can clear it. Yeah. So there's this little guy right here. What does this do? Show console sidebar. Okay. There's a sidebar. We don't really care for that. Let's just clear it. But now A still exists. Just our console's cleared. So let's see. Where were we? Right. Okay. Cool. So now we know about let. Awesome. So now we're going to start delving a little bit more into, let's see. Yeah, we'll just start with let for now. That's that keyword. So getting back to how do I put things on the screen? So remember how I was saying that like this contains code for other things? So those other things, let's start using those things. So what are the things? So remember how I said there was the DOM? It's cool. Everything in code is related. So there's the DOM. So to access the DOM, it's literally, I think it's called the document. So there you go. So if you type, so this is not, so I want to really quickly mention document. It's not a keyword. It's a thing. I don't know what to call it. It's like a feature that's built by someone else, particularly by the Chromium people, that gives you access to the DOM via JavaScript. Okay, so that's the thing. So the first thing is the document. And this, let's see, what did I use? Okay, I use those things. Just keep myself consistent. Access to the DOM with Java, or from JavaScript. Cool. So, okay. So if we go ahead, I like to do this. If so, document, there's another thing. So there's the dot. So, oh, that's actually a notation I forgot to talk about, which I can talk about now. So there's another like core. Let's call this the core syntax. Core. Or like your ABCs. So there's another thing in your ABCs. There is actually the dot. So and the dot is the thing that, let's see. Yeah, like a namespace. Let's see. Sorry, I've just seen that one. I kind of lost context for it. So I would say like dot gives you access to things inside, like access to variables that are contained in other things, or let's say it in things. So an example. So this is a little bit more complex than the other ones. So like, let's just do an example right now. Document dot location. There we go. So so this is another cool thing about the browser or the console explorer. There's this little arrow right here. You can actually click it and you can look at the properties of document.location. Same thing here. I could look at the properties for document. Okay, well, not quite. Yeah, that's just what it decided to show here. But anyway, for at least for document location, it actually shows the data. So the document.location has a bunch of it's a thing called a location thing that has a lot of things, has a lot of variables in it. It has a hash, a host, host name, href, origin. So I can go document.location. Let's just say origin. There we go. So that shows us so the origin is just that. The document.location.origin. So yeah. So example document.location. So yeah, access to variables that are contained in things. And I'll call them things for now. Technically those things are called objects, but we'll get into that later. I'll just say that now, aka object. Okay. So in this case, document, just a fun fact, document is a thing, aka an object. So document is an object, and there's another thing inside of it called the location. And then there was another thing called origin. That was an actual thing. And that was an actual variable. So it was like a thing variable. So generally, like as you go down like into an object, eventually you just get to raw variables. Like we'll see that more later. Let's see. Okay, cool. So what we want to do is we're actually going to use both these concepts we just learned to add something to the screen. So and this is answering that first question of like, let's see, how do I put things on the screen? Well, we're now getting there. Oh no, sorry, this one. How do I put things on the screen with JavaScript? Okay, let's see. How am I gonna? I guess this is like a side note. So I'm just trying to figure out how to structure my thoughts here. So we're here. That's where we are. So answer. So you need to use the document, and you need to also create an element. So that was here. You need to programmatically create an HTML element, and then you need to add it to the DOM using JavaScript. So let's do both those things. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to combine everything that we've done so far. So the first thing we're going to do is let's say let my element. So this is the name of my variable. It could have been anything. In fact, let me just, what should I call it? I'll call it, what's another fruit, apple. Let apple equal, the name literally doesn't matter. But you should use good names. But for now, just for learning purposes, yes, the hardest part of programming is coming up with variable names. That's kind of true. You're like, oh man, no, I don't really like this name. It doesn't quite explain what it really is. Like, it's like the player's, like the player's health rotational force. So I'm gonna say, like, literally, I'm gonna be like the player health. I don't know. I'm just making rotational. I don't. You know what I mean? Like, it just gets like, because it's not quite this and it's not quite that, but it's kind of like this. Anyway, yeah, I'm not gonna go that intense. Actually, for the sake of game development, because we're building a game on top of this engine called the browser, I'm just gonna call him player. Why not? So here we're gonna say player. So all this stuff I'm about to do, like for all these things I know, how do I know it? I know it because I just have a lot of experience with it. But there is like yeah, and I remember what they do. There's just some things you kind of know, like over time you just learn it. But like you can, like, just for the reference, like throughout this game jam, if you're planning to build a game using the browser as your engine, which I think is great for beginners, you can always just Google, literally, like, does this have, hello? I wonder if okay, cool. So Chromium's Google stuff. All right, Adele. It's funny. Okay, so like Google just, sorry, like what you could do is just Google your question. How, like, now that you know what the DOM is, or in fact HTML, how to add div to screen. Hmm, not quite. Yeah, so these are a little bit more advanced. That's kind of funny. So you can kind of see here, like, even Google is not like beginner friendly. Like, how to add a pop-up window with JavaScript. Like, no, all I want is add a div. Um, yeah, this is already too much. Crazy that there's nothing out there that's like quite beginner friendly, right? It's like it just goes into this crazy like how to do a pop-up window with jQuery and well, it's like oh my god, web development's so hard, you know. Okay, so I will tell you. Let's see. Yeah, true. Right, right. Yeah. I guess. Oh yeah. So yeah, I had no. It's kind of my fault. I had a bad Google message. But I was just what I was trying to do was like to simulate like okay, I'm a complete noob. I don't even know what the DOM is. You know, like how to add things to screen. I just learned what a div is, how to add div to screen, kind of thing. Um, no, backend's not that bad. Like I was saying, you just gotta once you know it, you know it. But yeah, arguably, you know, I build a lot of complex user interfaces, and I find that backend is actually easier than a very complex front end. Um, so they're just different. Backend is more like math and stuff. Yeah. Okay. Right. So this is how you create an element with JavaScript. So document. So we're going to use a document dot create element. Fun fact: this is called camel case. So JavaScript generally when you're naming stuff, you use something called camel case, which is rather than using spaces, because if we remember, spaces are ignored or spaces separate things. So you can see here like, oh, and actually I have two spaces. Doesn't matter. I could have two or one. I could have 10. Doesn't matter. But you cannot put a space in a variable name. So what you do instead of saying create like this, like document.create element, you use camel case. So everywhere has camel case. So document create element, and then it needs a name of the element, the type of element. So here we need to put in a string which represents the type. So if you wrote div, this wouldn't work. In fact, let me try it. Uncaught error, div is not defined. um, it's like, wait, but I wanted to create a div. It's like, well, let's back up a minute. What you just wrote was you said player equals document create element div. So, or div, the assuming div is a variable, which it's not. But I want to create a div. So there's this like little this kind of brings you to the next thing in coding to define to represent like a sentence, like words, like English words. Because again, this is code, right? To do in your code to represent a sentence, like a phrase of actual characters, you surround them in quotes. It's kind of like it's almost like in code to write an actual like to write actual English, you literally quote it. You can kind of think of it that way. You like if you follow what I'm saying, like it's like literally when you're writing an essay and you quote someone else, you have to put quotes, right? But like when you're writing code, if you want to literally write plain English in your code, you have to you quote it. So so that's how you write basically, and these are called strings. That's what these are actually called. Oh, another thing too, for strings in JavaScript, you can use either quotes, single quotes, or double quotes, that, or you can use single quotes. JavaScript's flexible; it doesn't care. That's different in other programming languages, but at least in JavaScript, you can use either. It doesn't matter. I personally recommend single quotes just because it's easier to type. That's the only reason why. You don't have to hit shift first. So let's go ahead and do that. Nice. Now we have, it said undefined because once again, oh, and I also forgot my semicolon. There we go. So you actually don't need the semicolons in JavaScript either. That's something that's technically not needed. But for beginner purposes, I highly recommend it. Just because it gets you in the habit of putting like a period at the end. It's like, yeah, it gets you in the habit of writing periods into your sentences. Just like when you're younger and you were learning whatever language you spoke as your first language, you want to learn your good grammar. Like you can get sloppy later on, but when you first start, like let's do it right. So right here, so we have said let player create element and sentence. So now if I do player, there's my div. It exists, but it's not on the screen yet. Um, so before I put it on the screen, let me go ahead and let me add to it. So I can say now that the player exists, let's say player dot. Again, we see that dot, and I think it's called text. Yeah. So once again, I just know this stuff, but it's called the player text content. So I can say player dot text content. That is the content of the inside of for what now is our player div. So let's say text content equals hello, or like hey there. There we go. A little bit more interesting. And it returned the string. Okay, that's whatever. So now if I look at player, I inspect player. Now it's a div that has the content, the text content, hey there inside of it. So now let's go ahead and add this element player to the DOM. So I'm going to go ahead and say document dot. So it's called to add things to the DOM. It's called append child. So append. There's append and append child. I'm going to take a quick look at what append. I like to like put a little parenthesis and see if there's any um like information, like because sometimes it gives you a little code hint, but it looks like this doesn't have a code hint. I don't know what append does. I know append child. That's what I know. Okay, so no code hints on either. I'm gonna take a quick look at what append is. I've never seen it. Append to array. Uh, so like this is gonna be like during your game jam. This is probably gonna be like a lot of what you're doing. You Google stuff you don't know. So here it is, document append. Let's take a quick look. Inserts a node. So just a fun fact, is a node is like kind of another word for an element, although not all elements are nodes. Sorry, all elements are nodes, but not all nodes are necessarily elements, like DOM elements. So basically, you can think of them as almost the same thing. So append. Okay. A set of nodes. So then what is append child? I've never known this. It's funny. I've always used append child just not thinking twice. But since it's a game jam, I have some free time to like some wiggle room to learn about what the differences are. Uh, adds a node to the list of children. Oh, unlike this method, the append method supports multiple arguments. You can prefer it if your node is an element. Okay, so I didn't know. So append child, basically they're the same thing. It's like you can prefer append over append child. Good to know. I think I'm gonna start using append from now on. Look at that, I just learned something. I don't believe it. Okay, right. So where were we? Where's my thing? Oh, there's my thing. So you know what? Let me go ahead and clear the console. I just like to do that for the viewers. Let's go ahead and put player up there again. I just type player, press enter. That's my player. It's just a div that says hey there. Not the most exciting player, but it's a player nonetheless. Okay, so now we're going to say document.append player. End statement. And just to mention here, I guess I've already called the function, but you can see append is a function, and we can see our parentheses again there, just like this. Going back to this, we have our function name, function. It's getting sloppy. Our function, our parentheses, just like math, right? Yeah, name, and then our input is the player. We actually want to append the player to the document. So I'm going to go ahead and press enter. And we get an error. So I will say this error was actually intentional. Um, it's like I am kind of playing mind tricks here. No, I'm not actually playing mind tricks. What I've done here is I'm simulating 80% of what's going to happen to you during your coding. So what just happened? What happened is something happened that it wasn't what I wanted it to do. And rather than crying and screaming and running around, being really angry at the world, what do I do? So I made my player and I said, document append player. What could possibly be wrong? Well, this is what, like, I'm going to give you the secret that all developers follow today. Watch very carefully, because you should do the same exact thing, and I'm not joking. You will find your answer. So I take this thing, I take that, I click Control C to copy it. I'm not even gonna read it. I honestly, if I don't have to read it, I'm not even gonna read it. I haven't even read it. I'm just gonna copy it. I can right click, copy. There's my old Google. I'll go ahead and paste that here. Press enter. And look at that. The same, and I'll go here. Yep, Stack Overflow. There you go. So we're already getting to Stack Overflow. Like, Stack Overflow and coding are like cousins. Like they're not cousins. They're like not like twins either. I don't know what to call them. They're like bread and butter. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know. Whatever two things like can't go without the other one, but they're different. I don't know. I don't know. Like unicorns and rainbows. Like you just can't have unicorns without rainbows, you know what I'm saying? Anyway. Because unicorns like ride rainbows, right? That's the thing. I don't know. I'm just kidding. I don't know. Let's see. Confirm my choices. Whatever. Okay. Let me tell you this about Stack Overflow. There's going to be all this stuff that's going to be part of the question, right? Like this huge question that's like so overkill, because it's like very specific. Like I'm trying to load an external SVG file. Blah 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 blah. Like, here's my advice: don't even read the question, like because the questions are like what people ask. Just go straight to the answer. Yeah, yeah, they're like the older brother. Yeah, you know what? Thank you for saying that. That's exactly what it is. It's like your older brother that helps you. That's way better than it's like way better than a unicorn and rainbows. Like you're the rainbow, and then like your unicorns. I don't know. That's silly. No, but yes, that's much better. Much better analogy. I like that one. Gonna use it. So okay. So this is how you use Stack Overflow now. The tutorial in Stack Overflow. Skip the question. Go down to the thing that says answers. Find the one with the most stars. So this is the number of stars or likes. What is it called? Likes? I don't know what that is. Votes. They're called votes. Find the one with the most votes. In my case, Dom was complaining because to add child to the document itself, I solved it by adding the body tag. So we learned something. So the Dom needs to have you need to add it to the body. And surprise, surprise, there's the body. So what did we learn? That DOM elements must be, visual DOM elements must be inside the body. And there we go. We can see there's the body, and there's all the elements. So within the DOM, the HTML DOM, there's two things. There's just two. There's the head. So the head has a thing we call it metadata. And metadata is just like data. Like it's things that describe the website. Like the most common metadata is the title, right there. So the title is what shows up here. Blank website. In fact, I wonder if I can do this. Document.head.title equals hey. Oh, it didn't refresh. I don't know. I wonder if there's a way I could refresh the title. Wait, can I do it? Let me see. Hang on one sec. JS. I'm going on tangents. I go on a lot of tangents, Data about data. Yep. It's the data about the data. And in this case, the second data, the data is the website. The The metadata is the data about this website. So a website is actually data. So yeah, so there's the data about the website, which is called the metadata. Any data about data is called metadata. And I don't know if there's such a thing as metadata. I don't know if there's data about metadata. I don't know why you would ever do that. I think you would just call it like attributes of the metadata. Anyway, we're going into some crazy tangents, but that's what that's what I like about game jams is that like they're less serious, Like you can do stupid things because it's not about we're not trying to like be professional. We're trying to build games. Anyway, yes, it's data about data. And the head stores metadata. And let me just see one thing real quick. I'm gonna say JS refresh title. If this is too much work, I'm not even gonna bother. I did that. Huh. Did I mess up? Oh, wait a minute. Oh, it was just document.title. That's weird. Really? Oh, okay. Well, for some reason, I don't know why, you don't need to use the head to do that. But I'm curious now if I do document.head.title equals yo. Nope, that didn't change. Oh, interesting. It changed it there. That's weird. Okay, that to me doesn't make any sense. I don't know why they do that, but whatever. So it's actually technically for that the head title is actually just straight title, document.title. I don't know, another fact. So this game engine, the web browser, this is a common theme. This is actually very important to know. This game engine has existed since okay, wait. When was the first web browser created? Yeah, so this game engine was built in 1990. And now what is it? 2022. So well, it's like, like 32 years. And every single thing, whether it's a game, a website, a video player, whatever, if it was built in 1990, it still has to work in 2022. So basically, there's a lot of nuances in JavaScript, and the reason why there's some quirky things. There's a lot of quirky, weird stuff in HTML, JavaScript, CSS, and the reason why those exist, you have to understand that this game engine was built in 1990, and this game engine has to support games or websites built in 1990 today. So it's like, so if at that time they were like, document.title is the thing we should do, they're never going to change that. They're always going to say document. It's going to be document.title. So that's a quirk. In my opinion, this is a quirky thing that, this is probably something they're like, no, like they said, like, well, the interface is already document title. We're not going to change it. So you will like you might encounter some quirky little things. The reason why it's like that is because someone made a decision that made sense at that point in history, but now it doesn't make sense anymore. But because that's the standard interface, they're not going to like change it. So anyway, little side story. That's the reason why this game engine, the web browser game engine, I'm calling it a game engine for the context of this game jam. But, that's why there's quirky things in JavaScript. And that's why a lot of developers are like, oh, I stay away from JavaScript. And it's like, fair. It's like, it's because there's a lot of history behind JavaScript. Whereas other programming languages, they try to manage that, what do you call it? Like evolution. They try to make it very small. And then JavaScript's kind of like free. They're like, let's just keep going. Let's just add. Like it's young and exciting and changing. And yes, 1990 for a programming language is considered young-ish. I don't know. JavaScript seems to stay young, whereas something like C stays steady. Anyway, stuff that doesn't really matter for beginners. I'm just going on a tangent. So yeah, so document.title is the way to change the head title. So was there we go. Okay. So there it is right there. We can see that's changed. But what we want to do is right, getting back to it. So yeah, that's the head. There you go. We're not going to deal much with the head. Um what we're going to deal with is the body. So document. So okay, so the guy on Stack Overflow or girl, the person, I solved it by referencing the body. So that's what we're going to do. So we're actually going to say document.body.append. Oops. Append. Player. Oops. Oh my gosh. Sorry, I'm really messing up. Append. Click. So yeah, that's the code hint. It lets you, it like just gives you suggestions that you think you want. Player. Another suggestion. Thank you. And my thing. And there we go. We got our player on the screen. Wow. um big big deal. There's your first. In fact, I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to delete all these things. I'm going to hold shift. Let's see if this works. Nope, that didn't work. I'm just going to have to delete them one at a time. I'm just clicking these guys and pressing delete. Luckily, I could just press delete a whole bunch. So there we go. So we got our player on the screen. There he is. Our player is a div that has the word hey there in it. Not the coolest player. But we can spice up our player. We can the first thing we can do, actually rephrase, to spice up our player, what we're going to do is we're going to add style. So let's go ahead and do that right over here. So let's go ahead and click our player. And you know, just so now I'm gonna do something else real quick, just to make it clear that this player is our player. There's a thing called an ID. So I can go player.id equals, we'll see this in a bit. I'll just call him the player. And what that's going to do on the DOM, it's actually going to add that fact. So div, oh, there we go. So like we can see like, okay, this div is our player. So just a little visual thing for now. That'll actually be more important later. Okay. So now we have a player on the screen. Like, this is getting exciting. Our game's getting a little bit more flavor, right? No, not yet. But, okay. Where did my style go? Oh, there it is. I was like, wait a minute. Am I crazy? Okay, so here... So the first thing we're going to do, and this is fundamental for games. So on the web, there's two types of positioning. There's relative positioning, which means like things are, so this div, see how this div got positioned below this. Oh, and by the way, a p tag, that stands for paragraph. And I'll just tell you a little fun fact right now. Paragraph P's are kind of like old school. So you can kind of tell a website is old school if they use P's. Like now people just use divs for everything. Like P was kind of like a div before the div, sort of. It technically now, P is a div that has built-in padding. But like you can see right here, look at that. There's actually a really good. We can see it has margin, inline start. Yeah. Oh, and this website, fun fact. So they have CSS on the body that says, hey, all text should be centered. If I go ahead and untick that, all the text is no longer centered. If it looks like they have a default color, that doesn't really matter. Oh, and they have a font family. Looks like there. If I get rid of the font family, we can see my font changes. So that's actually cool. Like that's a cool thing to teach you guys, right? Is you can uncheck CSS properties from the console, from the browser console style. Wait, the developer tools style thing. So right, I'll, you know, just for the sake, actually no, I'll get rid of all those, or I'll keep those all unchecked. It doesn't matter. Those are just styles that are already there. So now what I want to do, there's a thing called positioning. So I'm gonna say, so I'm right now, oops, I'm not on my player. Let me go ahead and click my player. Okay, so what I'm gonna do, so there's a thing called position. So the position attribute. Oh, another quick, okay, well, there's so many things I have to teach you. I'm getting like, my tongue's getting caught up. I'll go ahead and just type this. Enter. So, okay, so the first thing is there's two types of positioning in HTML or in like web development. There's relative, there kind of. I mean, there's other ones, but the main things is like there's relative and absolute. And then like there's another one, there's another few, but they're kind of similar to those two. And relative means I will be positioned relative to other things on the screen. Whereas absolute means I will be positioned relative to whatever container says I should be relative to. So that's kind of how you can um like absolute positioning. It's what we're going to use for our game, but it's absolute positioning. Oh, got a security alert. It's blocking some features. Now I trust Chromium. Oh, okay. Sorry guys, I don't know. This just popped up. Okay, sorry about that. So, right. So, let's see. Where was I? Right. So, absolute positioning is going to let me position things wherever I want, like exactly where I want it. Whereas relative positioning puts things relative to other elements. And when you're building a website, like 99% of the time, you're going to use relative positioning. When you're building a game, 99% of the time, you're going to use absolute positioning because you want things to move on the screen with fine precision. But on a website, you want like text to just show up next to other text. And when you put a picture, you want that text to go down relatively to that picture. So yeah, so for games, we're actually going to be using absolute positioning. By default, all elements are relatively positioned. They're actually something in the middle of relative and something else, but technically it's kind of like relative. So anyway, we're gonna use absolute. So we can see like by default, absolute just kind of like goes to wherever it makes sense. What we're going to do is we're going to force it to go somewhere. So once you have absolute positioning on, in fact, actually, yeah. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say, so you put things relative to the top, the bottom, let's see, this is going to be backwards. So the left and the right. So we're going to say top. And it wants it, for the sake of games, we're actually going to use pixels. So let's say 10. If you say 10, like 10 what? Actually kind of worked. It already assumed I meant pixels. I'm curious. Okay, that actually worked. Technically, you're supposed to put pixels. You're supposed to actually write px. Px stands for pixel. So you have to put those units. So top, I want it to be 10 pixels away. And then same thing for right. 10 pixels. Oops, sorry, I meant left. Left. So for the sake of games, we're going to use top and left. And that's how, just for like reference, and like in case you're a total beginner, pretty much all computer graphics, the top, like 0, is positioned at the top left. And there is a reason for it. The reason why is because when computer monitors were first invented, they started at the top left to render stuff. So that was 0. So in case you didn't know that, that's now you know the top left is 0 because of the way monitors used to render the screen. So it starts at the top left. So they just said that's 0. Okay. Groovy. So now we are at 0. So now if I and let me get rid of position absolute. So if I get rid of that, it goes back to its relative position, and the top and left attributes are ignored from the styling. So, but we obviously want it to be absolute. So that was just something I wanted to show you. If you get rid of the absolute positioning, it will become its old style positioning, and those will be ignored. And yeah, but we want to keep it. Let's see. So let me think. Right. Okay. So yeah, the other thing I wanted to do was I wanted to talk about CSS a little bit. So CSS is kind of like, it's almost like JavaScript, except you can kind of think, instead of equal signs, you use semicolons. No, sorry, colons. You use colons, and that's arguably pretty much it. Um, so there you go. Like I said, like did I not say like once you know one language, it's very easy to learn another language. So CSS is another language, but once you know JavaScript, like I can just tell you, oh, CSS is pretty much JavaScript, but instead of equal signs, you use colons. And there you go. Now you know CSS and JavaScript. Like, wow. See, that's what I'm talking about. And then once you know CSS, JavaScript, HTML, classes, inheritance, arrays, loops, this. Once you know all that stuff, doing like, I don't know, like C sharp in Unity will be a breeze. You'll be like, oh yeah, let me just like iterate through this list of enemies, check their distances, like do this, do that. Let me see how close I am to this. Let me see this. Like everything will be a breeze. But if you're first learning it, like if you're first learning Unity and you're also learning like programming at the same time, like I guess what I'm saying is like this stuff you're doing now, I've been on stream for 2 hours and 23 minutes, with the exception of like the first hour was just me talking about like just general stuff. So like the first hour, like you will still like the hour you like is just learning code, just the logic of coding, and you'll have to do that no matter whether you're doing JavaScript, C sharp, Unreal script. I think that's what it's called in Unreal. Whatever, TypeScript, anything. You'll still have to learn, code. So yeah, once you know code, you'll just walk like literally. I'm not joking. Let me like C sharp Unity class. Like just to show you what a C sharp class. Oh my gosh. Oh, here we go. Okay, this is actually. So here's some code from Unity, and you can see like we don't know C sharp, but look at this. There's a squiggly brace. There's some equal signs. There's some parentheses. So it's like, okay, there's a thing that takes in stuff, and then looks like, okay, there's some public int thing. Okay, like, oh, okay, those are statements. They end statements. So like, oh, this kind of like, so I will tell you, I'll just go ahead and tell you. Public means make it publicly accessible to other people. So in other programming languages, rather than using let, you have to actually say up front what is the type of this thing. So so int actually is integer. So I have a publicly accessible integer called bullets. So there you go. So this is kind of like let bullets. Yeah, bullets equal bool. So pass in a bool, like it basically did that. You pass in that data and then it stores it to bullets. So, okay, what am I trying to say? Is when you learn JavaScript, you kind of learn like every single programming language. Like, you kind of get like, oh wow, look, there we go. There's the input. That's kind of like the document. Like, okay, input get axis vertical. Oh, look, a string. Okay, cool. That's like that string is like just like the thing I did when I said like document.text content, right? So that's what I'm trying to say. When you learn one programming language, you kind of learn them all. Like, arguably you might know like at this point in time just after being on watching a 2-hour video you already know C sharp in a way. not exactly but like a lot of stuff is here. We'll get into if statements later. But yeah, like a lot of stuff you already know, which is kind of crazy. Okay, right, so where were we? Yes. Okay, so let's spice up our player. So right now he has text content. That's not like, and for the sake of the games we will be building, we're just going to build games with basic shapes. So, and the most basic shape is a square. Maybe later I'll add actual images to the to like the stuff. Like we'll actually use images rather than squares, just plain old squares. But for very beginning, we're going to use squares. So let's turn the player into a big red square. So to do that, let's go ahead first, let's say background, and let's make it red. Oops, did I just turn on caps lock? No, I didn't. Red. Okay, so yeah, so this is a CSS color code shortcut. So it's already red, like red. So there's some colors built in. If you're curious about those, you can go to CSS colors. You can Google that. This is a good. This might be. No, this. I know this one has a good list. Just if you want to, I'll go ahead and copy paste this to the stream. So that, yeah. So just like the CSS built-in colors that already have names. So these are so like every color has a code. I could have put in the code instead. Like, let me find red real quick. Dark red, red, medium red, orange red. They're just there. We go. There's the color code for red. If I did that, let me go ahead and replace that. Can I replace it? It's not having it. Not having it. Not happy with that. Oh, there we go. So if I delete that and I put this, so this is called a color code, and color codes start with this little hashtag. That's just a thing. Just keep that to memory. Fun fact, that's technically, it's called hex, hexadecimal. You don't, is that really beginner necessary to know what hex is? Absolutely not. But just hey, what you can know is that, okay, colors start with a hashtag, which is actually technically a pound sign, but maybe technically something else. Anyway, whatever. If I put that, same thing. But yeah, these are like, you can think of these as like shortcuts. And now that we're here, I'm gonna get a more fun red. Let's see. I'm just gonna look around. Something that's like a little bit more aesthetically pleasing. Crimson. Okay, so I'll copy paste crimson. I'll just go ahead and paste that there. All right, little cooler, just a small kind. Okay, now I'm gonna get rid of the inner the inner text. So let's go ahead and do that. Clear dot text content equals. So to get rid of it, I'll just put an empty string. So, oh my gosh, he went away. Don't panic. That's because there's no content to fill in the space. Let's go ahead and fill in that space ourselves. So we're going to say width. Let's do 40 pixels. And then height, 40 pixels. So we force the player to have certain dimensions. And if you're, let's see. And another thing too, let's go ahead. This page probably doesn't have it. Oh, maybe it does. Oh, cool, it does. Okay, so I was gonna say there's like sometimes the body. Oh, it still does. Sorry, like most web pages have built-in padding, but it looks like this absolute positioning bypasses the padding, so that's good. So I take that back. We don't need to think about that right now. So anyway, we now have our player positioned officially at the top left corner with a height of 40 pixels and a width of 40 pixels. We finally did it. We have a player on the screen. So yeah. So there we go. So he's absolutely positioned. Top, left, all that jazz. So cool. I think this is let's see. It's a good point maybe to ask a new question. So how to put things on the screen with JavaScript? We answered that with document.body.append. And then here we have to put in we have to put in an element. DOM element. And in our case, we put in player. Element was player. Cool. Let's see. Okay. Now the next question. Let's keep moving. Let's keep rolling. How to make things move. Okay, so now this is the next thing. So now this is, I said earlier that there's some things in programming for games that's pretty much true for all games. I just did tea and then water. I don't know why. So for games, there's always a thing called the I don't even know what it's called like officially, but I call it like the main loop. Like, or yeah, the main, let's call it the main update loop. That's what I like, because I like to call it update. Everyone has their own names. But there's this idea of this thing called the main, it's like the main thing that, it's like the ticker. It's like the heart rate of your game that's letting the game, like, it's like refreshing the page to render new pictures. So maybe it's like, you can call it like update refresh, uh, render. You know, it's the render loop. It's the thing. It's like the tick, like the loop slash tick. You can call it like the main tick. You can call it whatever you want. So how do you make things move? So first we need like a ticker, like that goes like tick 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 tick, at like, let's just say like 60 frames per second. So like, or so 60, like 60 things like ticks per second. So like 1/60. That's like, so we want it to tick every 0.01666666666 seconds. Um, so I mean, we could just approximate that. We could be like, we want a ticker that ticks every like 16. So this is, by the way, these three digits. If you just look at those three, that's milliseconds. And I think that in code, it's always in milliseconds. So like when you put in time stuff, it's generally milliseconds already, because most of the time you don't really care about seconds, you want milliseconds. So let's see. Okay. Let me see. Where's my thing? There we go. Okay. So, okay, we want this character to move. And, well, let me just show you this. So I can say player dot... Okay, so first of all, this is called the style. So to access the style of an element, it's actually very simple. You just say style. Style dot... So, and then we want to change to the left. So let me just say I want it to move to the left. So equals 20 pixels. So there we go. So I just moved my player. So 20, 30, 40, 50. Yeah, you see my point. Like, we can move it. So what I'm gonna do now, so rather than like, this is a string, but I want to be able to like add one to a string. And just to show you something, like let's say I had this string, like 50 pixels. You can't add one to the string that says 50 pixels. Like, watch what will happen if I do that. So 50 pixels plus 1. I got 50 pix 1, which is not what I want. In fact, if I tried to say player.style.left equals 50 pix 1, yeah, it didn't do anything. Didn't move. 0. Well, I don't even know what would happen. Yeah, see, it's totally messed up. It doesn't. It has the computer's like, I don't know what you're trying to tell me. So, oh, and this is another fact. So JavaScript is, well, it's not really JavaScript. It's more like JavaScript and browsers. They're very fault tolerant. So I don't know if that's the right word to say, but it's like very forgiving. It's like, I know there's no such thing as a pixel 1. Like okay, I get 50 pixels. Like if you said 50 pixels, I get what you're saying. But the browser's like, you put in 0 pix 1. Like, yeah, that doesn't mean anything. Like, you're speaking another language, I don't understand what you're talking about. I guess but in most programming languages, and this is kind of getting more to the reason why people like some people are kind of like against JavaScript, but I actually think it's really good for beginners, is that it's very forgiving. Yeah, exactly. Like if you go to Taco Bell, or like if you go to Taco Bell and you're like, maybe not even like pizza, but even something completely different. Like, can I get a space taco? You're like, I'm sorry? You're like, yeah, like a space taco. Like a taco from space, from, they're like, yeah, that doesn't exist. That doesn't make any sense. I don't, what? It's like, you get my point. It's something that doesn't exist. Like, in fact, what is a space taco? Maybe it's like carbon with some like helium. No, I don't know. Anyway, right. So, okay. So this is what we're gonna do. So we know we need that pixel thing, but we also want a value we can work with. So now we're getting into actual like code. Like, this is now things are getting a little bit more flavor. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a variable to store the player's position, and then use another statement to make that position update the actual player element's style. And if that didn't make sense to you, it will make a lot of sense when you actually do it. That's the thing I like about coding is that like things sound hard, but when you actually do them, they're actually really easy. Um, and that's not true in other disciplines. I feel like it's like, hey, write an essay. It's like, oh no, like it's really easy to say write an essay, but it's a lot harder to write the essay, right? In coding, I feel like someone's like, okay, like do this. It's like do this complex thing. It's like I can't really explain it very well, but then when you actually do it, you're like, oh, that wasn't that bad. Is that universally true? Depends on the problem, but anyway, for most of the part, it's like pretty easy. So okay, let's get to it. So let me go ahead and just. Oh, by the way, another fun fact: if you press up, you will see the history of everything you've done in the console. And same thing if you press down. You can basically like search the history all the way to let A and banana from like an hour ago. So yeah, there's like if you press up and down here, you get all your history. Pretty neat. So all right, so let me just go ahead and just grab this piece of history. I'll go ahead and just set it to 0. Actually, you know what? No, I decided. Changing my mind. I'm like thinking ahead. I know what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna put it to 50. You'll see why. So the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna create a variable. I'm gonna say let player x. And notice how I use camel case. I could do this, but then it's like player x. It's kind of weird. So when I do this, I put it in camel case. You understand, like, okay, it's the player's x position. In fact, I can even say player's x position. I can go all the way that, but whatever. You know what? For the sake of this, I'll just go ahead and call it player x position. Wow. Okay. And I'm going to say it is 0. So that didn't do anything. Like, you might be wondering, like, wait a minute. I said player x position 0. Why didn't that do anything? It's like, well, just look at the code. It's like all you did was create a variable and set it equal to 0. It's like that variable could have been called anything. Like it could have been called banana, but you actually have to apply it. So here's the next thing. Player.style. Let's see.